everybody. 大家好。我的名字叫郑伟。My name is Wei, and I'm actually from Informatica headquarters in Rose City, in the U.S. I'm extremely delighted to be here in Taiwan. This is my third time here in Taipei, and I'm really happy to be here to discuss with you one major topic that Tony mentioned as part of this presentation. That is the entire concept around big data, the value of big data, especially what Informatica is doing with big data and Hadoop. So here's a brief agenda. I know that there's been a lot of skepticism. Since I've been here, I was actually in Beijing. This is my second stop here in Taipei. And I heard a lot of people asking me about what is the real difference between big data? Do I have enough data to be considered big data? And what can I use Hadoop or some of these other technologies for? And can it really help me gain business value and gain the ROI that the business is looking for? So I'm going to be going over some of the major overview of the big data concept. One is from Informatica's perspective, what is big data? And then also talk about some really exciting brand new functionality from the Informatica platform that specifically supports big data, including Hadoop. So a very quick overview. This is kind of a standard definition from many of the industry, such as Gartner, IDC maybe have a 4V instead of 3V. But when I come to slice and dice it, I think the key thing that everyone needs to understand is that when people talk about big data, usually the first thing that comes to mind is volume of data. Big data must mean huge volume of data. And I have customers that ask us, I have only a few gigabytes of data. Is that big data? I'm not Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter. I don't have petabytes of data. Is that considered big data? So one thing to keep in mind is it's not just the volume of data, but also two other factors at least. One is the variety of data. The variety of data is the concept that more and more data that we're collecting today, especially the big interaction data that Tony already shared with you in his presentation, a lot of that data is actually semi-structured or unstructured. So instead of the traditional data warehousing and traditional transaction databases where you're storing fairly structured data, you're now encountering things like free-form text that you just saw from the Twitter feeds. Or you're getting device sensor data that are encoded in other type of formats. You're getting clickstream analysis that is in XML or JSON format. So the format of data is also a major feature or a major symptom of the big data trend that everyone is talking about. And then also the other V refers to velocity. Velocity is the concept that how quickly can you get the data that you're looking for at the time period which you're looking for. Meaning getting the right data at the right time is also more important than ever. And this is also a concern of big data. Because if you have so much data, how can you actually gain the value of that data in the time frame that you require to get that data or that information that you're looking for? So in addition to volume, variety and velocity are also two major concerning factors. And maybe later on you'll hear more V's that are being talked about in terms of big data, but these are the major ones. Now, that is kind of an industry definition. And then earlier you saw from Tony's presentation, and I'm not going to repeat what he said already about how Informatica considers big data. One thing I want to point out is that Informatica has actually been working with big data for well over a decade. We're not new to big data. It's just that the industry hasn't coined the term big data as much as it has done so now. So big transaction data, the thing on the left, the circle that's on the left, all the data format that's listed in there are something that you're working with today, probably. If you're doing data warehousing, if you're doing any kind of OLAP or OLTP, if you're using Teradata, Greenplum, HP Vertica, or any of these data warehousing appliances, you're working with big transaction data already. And you're probably using Informatica Power Center to use it as an ETL tool to help you process all that data into a data warehousing appliance for deeper analytics. And then of course, as the data sources move from on-premise to the cloud, you're also seeing data sources that are coming from the cloud being integrated as part of that data source that we support. But the new type of data is the ones that I'm really talking to you about today as part of the big data change that Informatica is seeing. The big interaction data that is on the right side of this slide is talking about the new kind of data that you're now gathering in the enterprise. So I already gave a few examples. One is social media. So Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, every one of you can relate to that kind of data. But there are also enterprise data that are big interaction that you might not think of. So every time when a customer comes to your website, or every time when a customer visits your customer service portal, they're generating clickstream information. If they're clicking on a specific ad, you wanted to know the efficiency rate and the clickstream rate of that particular advertising placement. These type of data are frequently captured in web logs. And web logs is also not something new. People have been analyzing web logs for many, many years, mostly for operational efficiency kind of use cases. They want to understand the uptime, the downtime, they want to understand customer service level agreements. But recently, people are mining the log file to understand about customer behavior. They want to understand about customer churn. They want to understand when you're about to lose that customer before you lose the customer, so you can do things to correct the problem. To mine the web log of today, you do need some special parsing tools because many times the log files is semi-structured. I mentioned earlier that XML and JSON are quite popular formats. But that's just one example in the enterprise that companies such as Splunk, other type of company that are purely focusing on just log files are taking off as part of the big data industry. The other type of data that Tony talked a lot about is the mobile device data. Every day that you have probably 5 or 6 devices in your home that are generating massive amounts of information that the manufacturer of those devices would love to capture. They want to capture that information because they want to understand also your behavior and your interaction with those devices in order to gain more personalized offering and be able to give you better recommendation and better services. So the example that's a local check-in, like you're at a restaurant or you're at a bar or you're at a club and you want to be able to receive in-time, just-in-time type of offers is dependent on a big data transaction and big data interaction system like the one Informatica is providing. So with so much information and so much variety of information, Informatica wants to provide a singular data processing platform, or what we call big data processing or big data integration platform. And our goal of the design of this platform is that we want to support you no matter what kind of data you're actually storing in your big data system. If you're doing data warehousing, traditional data warehousing, you want to leverage your existing investment with tools and technologies such as Teradata and Oracle and Informatica Power Center ETL. We want to give you the exact same environment and same platform that you can then use to also do the big interaction data processing that we talked about. So Informatica is one of the few vendors in the marketplace that offers a truly hybrid platform that allows you to do cloud computing, traditional ETL data computing, big data computing, social computing, all in the context of a singular integrated platform. And that's what I wanted to talk to you more about today from a product perspective as to exactly how this platform works and what's contained in it. And yes, you do see the Hadoop logo down there, and I'll talk a little bit more about Hadoop. So Hadoop is a really, it's been in development actually for several number of years. As many of you know, Hadoop is an open source technology. Actually, I just wanted to, I do this at every location I go to just to gauge interest. How many of you here know Hadoop, the technology Hadoop? Either heard of it or used it? Okay, so as you can see around the room, it's still a fairly early technology, and this is true even in the States. I think other than the major technology vendors like Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, people find Hadoop to be a daunting technology because there's not that many technicians or engineers that know how to work with it today. But it has been a technology that's been in development actually for over 5 years, and initially was invented by an engineer named Doug Cutting. He now works for Cloudera. He's their chief architect. And what is Hadoop exactly? Hadoop is a big data platform that has 2 major components. The first component is a highly distributed file system called HDFS, or Hadoop Distributed File System. And this allows you to store massive amounts of data in a highly fault-tolerant way on relatively cheap and economical hardware. And this is significant because prior to HDFS, in order to store large volume of data that you're going to be accessing fairly frequently and to ensure success in terms of not having high failure rates, you need to buy fairly expensive hardware to maintain that. And by using the Hadoop parallel computing technology, you actually could use commodity hardware to store that massive amounts of data. So that is the first component of Hadoop. The second component is called MapReduce. MapReduce is a parallel computing algorithm that allows you to take huge volume, large volume of data, and then divide them into many small equal chunks, in which every chunk can be locally processed on a single data node of Hadoop cluster. And at the end of that computing process, you can then combine the results, what's called reduce, or reduce that, into the final result that you're looking for. So by using a highly distributed and fault-tolerant storage system based on commodity hardware, along with a massive parallel computing algorithm called MapReduce, that is the power of why Hadoop is being seen as one of the most revolutionary and breakthrough technology that is fueling the big data platform growth. And on the bottom here, I'm showing, since Hadoop file system and MapReduce are just the two main components, there are actually other types of tools and query languages and supporting scripts and things that make up the entire ecosystem of what's considered a Hadoop distribution. And what I'm showing here is an example distribution from a company called Cloudera. Cloudera is one of the companies that is leading the frontier of creating open distributed systems that include all the Hadoop ecosystem. So think of Cloudera like the Red Hat of Linux. When Linux first became open source, many companies are looking for professional services and guidance and how to install an officially packaged set of software to allow you to enable functionality on the Linux open source platform. This case is very similar. Cloudera is providing a similar service where they're creating a bundle or a distribution of all the Hadoop components so that you, as an enterprise customer, don't have to worry about getting all the pieces together from Apache. Now, Cloudera is not the only vendor, of course. I'm listing some other vendors here that are also providing distribution services. And the good news is that Informatica is a partner with all of these companies. So you have MapR, which has some pretty special parts in the Hadoop distribution system that I'll talk a little bit later. You have the big companies such as IBM, EMC, Greenplum, companies such as Hortonworks, which is a spin-off from Yahoo that is now focusing specifically on the Hadoop big data computing platform. Now let me kind of move to, so now you know what Hadoop is from a technology perspective. You're probably still asking yourself, well, what can it do for me? What can it really do for me from an enterprise perspective? And just as Tony mentioned earlier about the formula of return on data, return on data is the value of data divided by the cost of data. It is a fairly simplistic formula, but it does bring across the two aspects of what I consider, or what Informatica considers, as the real value of what Hadoop or big data can do for you. The first aspect is reducing the cost. And this is something that everyone can understand. If it costs you $1,000 today to process 1 gigabyte of data, or 1 terabyte of data, whatever that unit might be, if you reduce the cost by half to $500 per terabyte or per gigabyte, you're of course getting increased value because you're spending less, but you're getting the same amount of value out of that data processing. So I think reducing cost is something everybody can relate to, and you might be asking, well, how does Hadoop help me reduce the cost? There are two aspects of cost reduction. The first aspect I talked about is the inherent hardware architecture. So by storing data on commodity hardware, not super duper, super dome computer boxes that has 24 CPUs and 8 tera or 8 gigabyte of RAM, you'll actually be able to save on hardware cost. So that's factor number one in terms of reducing cost. The second aspect is reducing software licensing cost. Now, everyone knows that Hadoop is open source software, but open source software, it doesn't equal free. It's not free because you still need the expertise. You need companies like Cloudera and Hortonworks frameworks and companies that help you manage the open source environment. But let me be very clear here. Having an open source software platform like Hadoop does change the basic economical model of how computing or data processing is being charged. So even vendors like Informatica or Teradata or any of the companies that are providing value on top of Hadoop is re-looking at their licensing model to understand how customers are now using this new technology, where they're seeking specifically cost reduction in their ecosystem. So lowering the cost of data is definitely something that Hadoop is helping enterprises today in achieving. So that's the first aspect. The second aspect of return on data is actually increasing the value of data. So assuming you're not reducing cost, or let's say you're reducing a little bit of cost, you still can gain more value from the data that you're accessing today by using big data and by using Hadoop. What are some of the typical examples? People ask for use cases, and I'm going to share a few with you guys because I think people want to know real-world examples. And I'll share 3 completely different examples. The first example is something that surprised me, because things like social media and clickstream analysis, you guys kind of familiar with. You guys understand that's big data. But when I visited, we conducted a 40 customer survey last year. I went to 40 different customers of Informatica, and I asked them what they think about big data and what they're doing with it. The first company we visited is actually a semiconductor company. And similarly, there's an example actually here in Taiwan that has a similar use case pattern. Semiconductor is not something I think of when I think of big data. I think of as very relational, very structured information, products, probably description of the product catalog, customers, or manufacturing supply chain data. But they're using Hadoop. This was about 1.5 years ago, so this was very advanced and very early stage. They were looking at Hadoop to process chipset testing data. And this semiconductor company is actually something that you're familiar with because they manufacture video card display adapters. And often they get failure reports from their customers. The customers are coming in and says, my video card is not working. And the support team helps troubleshoot what exactly caused the video card to fail. Sometimes it's the monitor, sometimes it's the operating system, sometimes it can be the computer hardware itself or the motherboard. But often than not, this process is very tedious, and they're able to only capture about 25% to 50% of all the failure incidents that are being reported. And this is not including the massive amounts of internal testing data that they capture every day across 100 locations where they're doing testing of the chipboard sets. So what they're using Hadoop for is they realized now they have the ability to actually analyze all of their failure testing data. By using Hadoop, they're able to take all the testing data that they're working with and store it in HDFS. And they're also using Informatica, and I'll talk a little bit about how they're using Informatica, but the actual chipboard test data is stored in a format called Google Protobuf, which is actually serialization format, very similar to XML. A serialization format allows you to compress a large volume of semi-structured data, which is their testing chipboard set data, into the Hadoop file system. And then they're using MapReduce algorithms to analyze and do predictive analytics to understand under what combination scenarios the chips are most likely to fail. And by using that system, they were able to improve the overall quality of the chipsets and be able to isolate the actual areas that are most troublesome in terms of chipboard manufacturing by as much as 50%. And they come to Informatica to ask us for help because even though they were able to do it initially for one small product that they were running, they wanted to take that and extend it across 10 or 15 different product lines that they had in the company. And they want to ask Informatica to help them manage that entire process and give them an automated platform or automated tool set so that they don't have to hire the most expensive programmers in order to leverage the power of Hadoop. So I thought that was a really interesting example because it shows that even in an industry or enterprise that you might not traditionally consider big data, they're using the big data technology to help them gain more value out of the data that they already have. So that's the first example I want to give. The second example I want to give is more of a consumer example, because I think all of you guys can relate to this. When I came here to China, I was looking to buy an airline ticket, just like all of you today. And you guys use something maybe like Bin Travel or Expedia or the Thousand Kayak. There's so many different travel websites out there. I don't know if you've noticed that some of these websites lately start offering something called a price indicator. And what that is that if you go buy the ticket today, I flew from San Francisco to Beijing, and I went online and searched for one-way round trip or round-trip ticket for Beijing. The day that I went to visit that website, the website actually told me that I should wait. I should wait because the price is most likely 80% likely to go down. And they're able to do this kind of predictive modeling based on a huge variety of factors, such as the weather. All of you guys know a typhoon is coming to Taiwan. I'm very scared. Hopefully it doesn't land before I leave. But things like weather, things like the cost of fuel. Fuel cost is a huge contributing factor to airline ticket prices. And I'm absolutely stunned that the travel provider can leverage all of this information and also the behavior of past passengers. Based on the dates of time of travel, they're able to analyze, based on a huge quantity of data, of how likely and how full that flight is going to get. So I thought this kind of added value services is what's going to bring customers back to buy airline tickets from them instead of from someone else. And when you look behind the scenes as to how they're able to do this, they're leveraging MapReduce and Hadoop. They're no longer only sampling 20% or 50% of all the statistics data that they're able to collect. They're now sampling 100% of 3 years, sometimes 5 years. One company in the United States who's providing travel services says sometimes it takes 10 years worth of data to understand how likely price sensitivity is going to react to the different factors that I talked about. So that's another completely different example of a company, a consumer company, offering services to its customer is able to leverage big data and the technology provided by big data to give the customer, all of you, more value. So that's the second example. And the example goes on and on. The third example I'll talk about is probably also something that some of you may be familiar with. And that is in the financial services industry, yet again, shifting completely to a different vertical. In the FinServ industry, we have large banks and large insurance companies that are looking to gain more value out of the data that they have, but in a more preventive measure. They're doing what's called fraud analysis or fraud detection. Fraud detection is when someone uses your credit card to go buy something unauthorized. And you're probably very familiar with the scenario if you travel a lot like me. Whenever I come to a new country that I haven't been in a while, and I start to use my credit card for the very first time, I get a call from the bank automatically. It says, oh, you're in Beijing, and you just swiped your card for $200. Did you really meant to do that? And this is not that unique, but the fraud detection system has gotten a lot better in terms of being able to increase the accuracy of preventing actually the fraud from occurring in the first place. And it's able to do this because it's mining all of the data it has collected about you, the customer, including all the transactions you make at the ATM, includes all the purchases that you make on your Visa or MasterCard or credit card that you're using, includes the branch visits that you visit, including the check-in, and now these days you have mobile payments on the phone. In the US, one of my favorite things is Starbucks local payment. You can just swipe your phone and be able to buy your favorite beverage. So all of these kind of transactions that you're having is giving the banks and the insurance companies the ability to anonymously, most of the time anonymously, track the usage and location of the data, and then be able to identify, even before the fraud is about to happen, be able to reduce the fraud incident rates. And again, a lot of these banks are using Hadoop and MapReduce to achieve that data mining capability. So I gave you 3 very different examples from 3 completely different industries where many of these big data use cases is not simply about the data volume, but it's about the variety of data and how they're actually using Hadoop to gain more value out of the big data platform. Now let me tell you how Informatica wants to help you. one of the main reasons that I'm actually here in Asia is to promote about the new Informatica platform for Hadoop. This is something that has been quite a while in the making, about 1.5 years or 2 years for Informatica from a development perspective. It's a brand new platform that Informatica is introducing to help you be able to leverage the power of Hadoop in helping you with unleash the power of Hadoop so that you can solve big data problems that I described earlier. And this is a quick summary of what Informatica provides end to end. So many customers come up to me since I've been here asking me, do you provide connectivity? Do you do ETL? Is this going to replace Power Center? There's been a lot of different questions. And I think this is a good slide to refer them back to, is that this lists all of the functionality that Informatica is providing around Hadoop and big data. And if you go through the stack, it's quite familiar if you already know ETL, because this is really no different from ETL from that perspective. The first step in the computing lifecycle of big data is ingest data or loading data into Hadoop. And this step is important because in order to leverage the MapReduce capability that I talked about for Hadoop, the file and the data themselves have to sit on the Hadoop file system. And today you may have the data sources sitting everywhere else but Hadoop file system. So your first step is actually to move or copy that data into HDFS. Informatica provides a very wide range of connectivity options that allow you to take data from any data sources. This could be files, it could be relational database, it could be mainframe, it could be applications like SAP, Oracle apps, it could be even data of semi-structured or unstructured format like XML or JSON files. So the first step is to ingest the data. After you ingest the data, the second part is something fairly unique to Informatica, and it's a problem that a lot of our customers are saying that now they're running into. If you take all the semi-structured data and you take all of that data and you put them on Hadoop, over a period of time, the customers may be wondering, what data do I exactly have on HDFS? This isn't like relational databases where you have a schema and it's actually a file system, so you don't really have things like a schema where you can go query the metadata of the data structure. So one of the examples, Tony showed a demo earlier called Enterprise Discovery, where you can actually use Informatica data profiling to profile the data that you have stored on Hadoop. And this is important because using Informatica profiling, you can understand the metadata structure of all that semi-structured or unstructured data that you have sitting on HDFS. And this goes hand in hand with the third step, which is the parsing step. So in order to take semi-structured data like XML or JSON, or many of the industry-specific format, like in the telecom, there's all these call detail record format like ASIN.1, or in the healthcare industry, there's Accord. In the financial industry, there's Fix, and there's all these different kind of variety of format. In order to process those formats into something that MapReduce can actually take advantage of, you need the ability to be able to parse the data from the semi-structured format into a structured format. And that is something Informatica can help you with as well. So by combining the ability to parse the data, as well as the ability to profile the data, you have a very clear picture of what exactly is on your Hadoop file system at any given moment in time. And that is something that Informatica offers that no other vendors are offering right now, and especially having them running actually on Hadoop. And then the fourth step is something that you guys are familiar. This is the transformational step. So this is where today, if you're using Power Center, you know that you can use a variety of data integration transformations like filter or expression or aggregator, joiner. So all these transformations are available to you now on Hadoop. What this means is that you can write your data integration logic in what you're familiar with already today, and during runtime, it will actually translate the integration logic from the transformation that you've written into MapReduce that will execute on Hadoop and allow you to take advantage of the Hadoop ecosystem. And then the very last step here, extracting data from Hadoop. You might be asking, well, why do I need to extract data? If I already have the data analysis done on Hadoop, then why do I need to take the data out of Hadoop? That's actually a good question, and I think it's something that's changing as I'm speaking to you today. many of the analytics tool downstream, so after you've done your ETL kind of processing, you might want to use analytics platform like SAS or Oracle Exalytics or R, which is a statistics language, to do further analysis on that data. But many of these systems today, or the BI tools like MicroStrategy, Cognos, Business Objects, those type of tools do not yet work natively with the Hadoop ecosystem. And they're working on it as we speak. For example, MicroStrategy recently released connectivity for Hadoop. But until then, many customers feel that it's necessary to subset a set of the result of the Hadoop computing results and then pull them or push them into a traditional data warehousing appliance like Teradata or Oracle or any relational structure, so that you can do normal relational things such as reporting and other type of analytics on top of it. So I think end-to-end, from ingestion to parsing and profiling, as well as the ability to transform and then also read the data out of Hadoop, end-to-end that process is what Informatica can help you with today using the Informatica for Big Data platform. And then some of these other capability on the side that I show here, these are your traditional packaged enterprise software capabilities. One of them include how do you monitor and administer a big data platform when you actually have a runtime engine that is not part of Informatica. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get there. So I want to summarize kind of the benefits of Hadoop and why Informatica and what are the benefits. By using Informatica, you're going to gain repeatability. And this is something I talked about earlier, which is if you are using Informatica for Hadoop, not only that you're able to do it for one project, but you should be able to repeat that process for many different projects as part of the Informatica software lifecycle. The other benefit, the second benefit, is that Hadoop is still a fairly young technology. It's a new technology because many things are happening to it as we speak now. There are new source code, new version changes. Many people wonder, is Hadoop going to be here to stay? I think it will be. But many people are wondering, is Hadoop going to stay? Is next year or the year after, you're not going to come out, the industry is not going to come out with something called Hadoop or some other type of technology that you're making the wrong bet at the wrong time. Informatica can help you with that change because it gives you an isolation layer, and no matter if you want to run it on Hadoop or you want to run it on Teradata, you want to run it on Informatica native Power Center, you have a singular user interface and a single platform to do so. The third benefit is you actually can leverage your existing Informatica metadata assets. So if you're a Power Center customer, you actually have the ability to take those metadata, import them into Hadoop, and be able to run the existing data integration logic on Hadoop. So you don't have to throw away any of your existing investment. And the fourth aspect is probably one of the most important aspects, which is you can also reuse your existing skill sets. So if you have ETL developers today, one of the things I talked about earlier, the challenge of Hadoop is it requires advanced programming skills. So you need to understand Java MapReduce. How many Java MapReduce programmers are there in the world? I can guarantee you less than the number of ETL developers or IT developers in the world. So because of the technology challenges, Informatica can help you with not knowing anything specific about Hadoop or about MapReduce and allow you to develop in the exact same way you've been doing it so far, and then take advantage during runtime and leveraging the parallel computing power of the Hadoop ecosystem. And last but not least, the governance aspect. Having an entire integrated suite of products to help you manage your Hadoop ecosystem in relation to your Informatica development environment. These are the benefits in which Informatica offers that I think very few other vendors can offer in the space of data integration. So in the interest of time, like I mentioned that I'm here, you can come and ask me about anything that I've talked about so far. In the interest of time, I'm going to go over some details over a few of the capabilities. One of them is the ingestion capability I talked about. The only thing I want to point out here is that not only do we have the ability for you to load data in a batch fashion, Hadoop is primarily considered still a batch system, you have the ability to actually replicate, stream, and archive data as well. So these are the variety of mechanisms in which you can move data in and out of Hadoop. Not only you have to move the data all at once, you can stream the data using, for example, and I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit in the interest of time, and show you that you can use Informatica Ultra Messaging to be able to continuously stream the data as the data becomes available into the Hadoop file system. And the second aspect is archiving. This is also an interesting use case. People mention that, can I use Hadoop as an archiving system? I have a lot of files that I don't use frequently, but I want to be able to analyze them sometimes. So we do provide the ability as part of our Informatica Lifecycle Management software, or IOM, the ability for you to archive data from any data sources into the Hadoop file system. And similarly, we have the ability for you to archive from Hadoop. Now you might be asking, why would I archive from Hadoop if I'm archiving to Hadoop? And the answer is very simple, because despite the fact that Hadoop is cheaper and economical hardware, there's even cheaper there's even cheaper ability for you to compress the data from Hadoop into a much more economic way of storing that data. And this is really for data that you don't use very often. For example, audit data. Every couple, you're required by the government to keep up to 15 years worth of data for auditing purposes, but you don't really expect to use it every day. So for that type of data, you have the ability to actually analyze that information and then archive it from Hadoop into a cheaper and more compressed file storage. And I'll mention a little bit about HParser. So HParser is the ability that I mentioned earlier, where you can actually parse semi-structured and unstructured data from any data sources. And you can see here we support all kinds of file formats, so flat file, XML, industry standards, and of course, the latest social media data. So we have Power Exchange connectors for LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and actually through a partnership with a company called Kapow, we have the ability to mine any web data. You can use the platform to scrape any web pages for information that you're looking for. One of our e-commerce banking customer is actually using HParser to scrape data from the payment systems. So many e-commerce vendors. So here in China, I know that there's a platform called Taobao. But in the US, there's things like eBay, where eBay and PayPal have formed a partnership, or now they're the same company, where many vendors have these payment pages. And if you're looking at the anti-fraud use cases I was talking about earlier, they're using HParser and using the ability to connect to scrape all the payment information from the vendor or the e-commerce partner payment pages. So I think that's a pretty unique way of using the Hadoop technology as well. And we do have the ability to support you by giving you the parsing functionality. And here's a diagram that illustrates how exactly it works. We take the actual parsing library that Informatica offers, and we deploy the parser library onto every data node of the Hadoop cluster. So if you have a set of info file that's very large in nature, by using Hadoop, it automatically divides the workload into many different smaller workloads, and each one of those workloads is being executed on every node of that Hadoop cluster. And on the Hadoop cluster, it has the parser library to be able to parse that data into a relational format that you can work with. So that is HParser. And this is just showing the variety of formats that we can support. If there's a format that we do not support, we actually provide a graphical user interface for you to design your own parser. And this is that if you have your own custom file formats that you have, that no one else has, we have the ability to give you the ability to, we have the ability for you to design your own parser so that you can run it on Hadoop. And here's an example. We have a large e-commerce customer who have proprietary web log. So this is the log analysis I was talking about earlier. And you can see the format here is JSON, which is a semi-structured format. And they have about 500 gigabytes of that data every week that they need to process. By using HParser and the power of Hadoop, they're able to parse that information easily using Informatica for Hadoop. And profiling and discovery. The profiling capability that I talked about earlier is not a new functionality from Informatica. However, we have the ability now to run the actual data profiling on the Hadoop ecosystem itself. So Informatica 9 introduced a tool called the Informatica Analyst tool. And the Analyst tool is something typically being used by a business user. You have the ability to do data profiling and examine the characteristics. Actually, you saw earlier in the example demo that was given, the profiling was being carried out as they were doing natural language processing. This is the same example here where you can use the same profiling capability, analyze the null values, analyze the string values, and be able to run that profiling analysis end to end, and then do that using the Hadoop execution environment. This is all possible as part of the Informatica 9.5 big data capabilities. And a domain discovery capability that was talked about, this is a new functionality from Informatica as part of version 9.5, where you can identify not only metadata characteristics like null value, but you can also look at private or sensitive data like social security numbers, the ability to discover credit card number formats, and be able to allow you to mask using our data masking transformation or data reduction to be able to see not the sensitive value that is being displayed from the source system, and run the entire domain discovery system also on Hadoop. And the last step here, and I'll just talk about this for 2 minutes, and I think this is very important because a lot of you are asking how exactly are you taking your Informatica transformation and translate that to MapReduce? How does it really work? And the way it works is that we first translate the Informatica mapping, which you see up here. This is something you're very familiar with. This is Informatica Power Center mapping. And during runtime, the first thing we do is we translate that Informatica mapping into HiveQL. HiveQL is a language equivalent, is a SQL language equivalent using Hive as an intermediate translation layer. Hive by itself translates to parallel MapReduce jobs. So that's the first step. And we chose Hive because Hive is relational in nature. It has the ability to work with the existing Informatica ecosystem very easily. And most importantly, if something goes wrong, our customer wanted to know what exactly got translated, and they want to be able to read the code in the logs or in the troubleshooting system that they're facing with. So that is the reason why we chose HiveQL. And then by using HiveQL, we're able to take any Informatica mapping, which contain any Informatica transformation and data sources, and be able to run that entire mapping end-to-end on Hadoop. This includes transformations like data quality, data masking. And you might be wondering, well, HiveQL doesn't exactly have the equivalent of address cleansing or masking capability. And the reason we're able to do that is, in addition to translating to HiveQL, we also deploy what's called the Informatica Data Transformation Library on every node of the Hadoop cluster. By doing that, every data node in the Hadoop cluster becomes an Informatica runtime environment. So I hope that kind of explains, from a technology perspective, how we're able to provide you the value that I discussed earlier. And this is just a slide to show that you can import metadata from Power Center. If you have existing metadata from Power Center and you want to be able to leverage that metadata and run it on Hadoop, you have the ability to import that metadata directly into the Hadoop environment. And the user interface should be very familiar, because this is the same exact interface that you're using Power Center for today. So you don't need to have the special technical skills like MapReduce skills or Hive or Pig or any of the scripting skills to be able to use Informatica for Hadoop. And I'll show you a screen on monitoring because I think this is also important. If something goes wrong in the mapping that you run and you want to be able to take a look at the actual HiveQL query that it got generated, Informatica provides you with a query plan of every mapping that's being running on Hadoop and allows you to see the actual query plan, the actual HiveQL query plan that it got generated, so you have the ability to troubleshoot if something goes wrong. In addition, because Hadoop is running in a separate system from that of Informatica, you actually have the ability to monitor the jobs that Informatica is generating. So if you decide to run your ETL job on Hadoop, you have the ability from the monitoring screen and drill down into the actual job tracker or MapReduce jobs that's on the Hadoop cluster. So it can tell you status such as how many mapper have been completed, if the reducer step has kicked off, and you have additional ability to troubleshoot from that perspective. And the reason I want to share all this detail with you guys is because I want to let you know that this is a comprehensive ecosystem. This is not just the vendor's attempt to join the big data moniker by giving you an adapter here or giving you a parser there. This is an end-to-end ecosystem from loading to parsing to profiling to transformation to administration and monitoring. The entire stack has been enabled on Hadoop. I will close by saying and tell you guys a little bit more about availability. So all of you by now is probably wondering, when is all this great functionality going to come out? We currently have a release as part of Informatica 9.5, and we already have the ability to give you the connectivity that I talked about, which is allow you to take any data from any data sources and load them into Hadoop, as well as the ability to read data from Hadoop. That connectivity option is already available. In addition, the H-parser functionality that I described, that where you can take any data from any format and translate into a relational structure format that you can use MapReduce with, that functionality is also available. Everything else that I discussed is currently actually in beta. We're in development, we've completed development, and we're starting a beta program to trial the software with a few customers. And we certainly welcome any use cases here in Taiwan, or if any customers are interested in learning or understanding more about Hadoop capability, where Dolly or many of the folks here can speak to you about that, or the beta program. But the general availability date of everything I discussed is going to be end of this year as part of 9.5.1 or 9.5.1 release. And this is one that the entire stack of software that I described will be made generally available to all of you. In addition, I also want to mention that we're introducing a new bundling of our software to make this even more easily accessible by existing Informatica Power Center customers. We're thinking of introducing a new edition of Power Center called Power Center Big Data Edition, which is going to include standard Power Center, and it's going to include all the Hadoop functionality that I talked about. It's going to include connectivity to data warehouse appliance and social media, because you want to be able to harness the value of all the social media big data. And it's also going to give you the ability of H-parser. So all that great functionality is going to come into an edition bundle so that you can upgrade from your existing Power Center Standard Edition, or Advanced Edition, or Real-Time Edition. So this is when the software is going to become available. And with that said, I just want to say thank you for coming to this information session, and hopefully what I have presented is useful. Like I mentioned earlier, 我会讲国语，所以你们可以等结束的时候可以用国语来跟我交流。Okay, so with that said, thank you so much and I appreciate your time.
我们掌声感谢中国股市的精彩演讲。